In this video, I'm going to share things that I wish I knew about driving in Alaska or the North before moving up here. So my name is Samara. I've been living in Fairbanks for just under 2 years. And I shared a video, I think a year ago, about how I felt about living in Fairbanks, and there was a lot of positive response from that. So I figured I would make more Fairbanks related or Alaska related videos to help people who are moving up here. And so these are just things that I wish I knew about driving up here and how things are different. So I'm going to break down the video based on seasons. We'll start with winter, then I'll talk about summer, and then I'll talk about the shoulder season, so like spring, fall. And then at the end, I'll share just general tips that I wish I knew. So you're probably wondering, what the heck? What do you know? You've only been living there for about 2 years or just under 2 years. Why should I listen to you? And that's a fair enough statement. However, I do drive a lot. And speaking with different coworkers and friends, I've seen a lot of the state, even more than some people that I work with, which is quite surprising because they've lived here for 20 plus years or maybe even their whole life, but they just don't get out the way that I do. So maybe I'll show a map of all the different highways that I've taken all the way to the end, like the Dalton. I've gone up the Taylor, not to the end, but I've done the top of the world loop, which goes into the Yukon Territory. I've driven all the way down to Valdez. I've gone to Seward. I've gone down to Homer even. I've done the Denali Highway. I've done most of the Elliott. I've done 3/4 of the Steese. Definitely get around by vehicle, which there isn't a lot. You don't see 100% of the state that way, but wherever my Jeep can get me, that's where I'm going. So anyway, let's just jump right into the tips. So the first thing about winter is the whole concept of winterizing a vehicle. That's something that, if you're living in anywhere else in the United States, most places you're not necessarily going to need to do that. Now, what that actually entails, I'm not a car mechanic person, so I don't know 100%. Hi, this is Samara from the future, or actually the present, editing this video. I do a really poor job explaining what winterization is, so here's a clip of Riley mansplaining it for you all.
What is winterization? Fluids changed out. Antifreeze is rated for extreme cold. Oil that is full synthetic, zero weight. Washer fluid that does not freeze in extreme temperatures, rated for -30 or below. And then you'll have electrical components installed in the vehicle, such as a block heater for the engine to keep it warm, an oil pan heater, transmission pan heater, and a battery blanket or a trickle charger on the battery. All of those things, all of those electrical components are all tied together and into a junction box in the front of the vehicle, and an extension cord hangs out the front of the vehicle so you can plug it in wherever you go. That's it.
A lot of the newer cars, they'll still start, but they're just angry. So to help keep the integrity of all those components in the engine and everything, there are these heaters that then will warm the vehicle and warm the fluids in the vehicle. Is that something that you need to schedule before moving up here? Yes and no. I wouldn't have it done outside of Alaska, but I would call and schedule your appointment when you know you're going to be up here, because those appointments do fill up fast. And so, you may want it the next week when you're calling and they're not available for a few weeks out. So understanding that when you're moving up here, especially if you're moving in the winter, just try to have that scheduled around when you arrive, because when temps are very, very cold, it's helpful to do that. I don't necessarily plug in my vehicle until it's 0 all day or colder. People who have diesel, I notice at work, they will plug in their vehicles maybe at even 20 degrees or something like that, just because diesel is harder to run, or diesel vehicles are harder to run at colder temps than gasoline. And like I said, during the drive up from Arizona to Alaska, I didn't have my car winterized, and in the Yukon Territory, Haines Junction, we woke up and it was 20 below and the car still started, and it was out all night. Or even in Tok, it was the same thing, 15, 20 below, and it still started even though it was out all night. So it'll still work. But just to help keep the integrity of your vehicle, it's definitely something that I would recommend. One other thing that you may not think about, which is very important, especially if you're driving up here in the winter, is your windshield wiper fluid. So I didn't know this, because why would I know this? Windshield wiper fluid, you just turn it on, you can clean your windshield, it's fine, it's great. Well, it's not all rated for super cold temperatures. So what happened when I was moving up here in February 2024, is I didn't know that, so I didn't change out the windshield wiper fluid. And by the time we got into Canada and Banff or Jaspers, where we were staying, overnight it froze. And so now we're driving on these roads, and it's like a slushy mess because they use some sort of brine in Canada to help keep the roads cleared or melt the ice and all that. And it was just getting all over the windshield, and I could not clean it off. It was crazy. We were like pouring it over the top of the windshield and like trying to scrape it off, and could only drive every so often, like a few minutes, before it was just like completely covering the windshield again. I wish I got pictures of it because it was pretty ridiculous. Thankfully, we were lucky enough that it got warm, or it was like sitting in the sun, the car was, where it was able to warm the windshield wiper fluid components, and so they weren't frozen anymore. But then they froze again because I thought that I had used it all up and it took it all out, but there was still some left in the tube. So it froze twice and melted twice. And then finally we ran the new cold rated windshield wiper fluid through the tubes, and everything was fine. But anyway, yeah, that's another thing that you may not think about, that I definitely did not think about, is your windshield wiper fluid. If you're moving up here in the winter, you're going to be driving through winter climates, make sure the windshield wiper fluid is rated for cold temps. Okay, another thing that I will say is, if you have auto start in your car, great. That's going to be your best friend. If you don't, maybe consider having something like that installed so you don't have to physically go outside to your car to start it and warm it up, because that is another thing about like winter driving and winter vehicleness, is you want your car to warm up, both for the comfort on the inside, but also have the fluids and everything like warm up before you start driving away. And if you have heated seats and a heated steering wheel, even better. I didn't even realize this, but my vehicle has heated seats in the back seat. So if I'm taking a big group of people somewhere, even they can be comfortable. Another thing that's very similar to winterization is your tires. So a lot of folks here will have summer tires, and then they'll use like Blizzaks or studded tires in the winter, and then they'll change them out, whenever things are starting to get a little frozen here in like the fall, winter months. Well, really it's fall because it's technically not winter now. It looks like winter, but it's only November. Ha! So I do not do that. I use all terrain KO2s. So they have the little winter symbol on them, and they can count as winter tires, but they're not true winter only tires like Blizzaks. And I think they work for me. So you'll just have to, find out what works for you. But most people have a set of winter tires and a set of summer tires. I just use the KO2s, and they work fine enough. The next thing I'll talk about with driving winter in Alaska is just winter driving is different than summer driving. And if you have never lived in a winter place, for me, it meant slowing down significantly, like not being in a rush to get anywhere. The speed limit may say one thing, but you should drive what you feel comfortable driving and what is appropriate for the conditions of the road. So like today, driving out to this spot, the speed limit for most of the highway is 55, and I was going probably like 45 for most of it max, and then even taking the turns as slow as like 30 miles per hour. And that's just how I feel safe. Like I'd rather drive a little bit slower and make it to my destination safely if the road is covered in ice. And I'll show a picture of what the road looked like. It was just, there's certain spots where it's just a sheet of ice, and I could tell my car was starting to like glide a little bit. And I'm like, well, all right, slow down. So with that, another thing that I learned is that I don't make really abrupt movements when I'm driving. Everything is very like smooth and almost like you're melting into whatever you're doing. Like if you have a turn coming up, like start slowing down gradually. And if you're trying to turn somewhere, don't like sharply turn, go into it and all that. Like I'm not telling you how to drive. This is just what I learned that I need to do. I also know that whenever I take turns quicker than like 20 miles per hour, I'll start slipping out. So I really try to make sure that I get my speed down low, under 20 miles per hour, even less than that, and ease into the turn. It's almost just like gliding into it. Nothing sharp. Sharp is bad. Slow and controlled is a lot better. At least that's what I found. Another thing about that is when driving in town, a lot of the intersections, I mean, there's probably some sciencey reason as to why this happens, but they are just so slick. Probably because there's a lot of vehicles. It's a lot of like, especially at like the stoplights themselves. If you have your running vehicle and then it's like a cold ground, you're creating ice because you're constantly melting that hard pack or the snow or whatever it is there, and then refreezing it. And so it's just creating this ice sheet. And maybe that's why it feels really slick. But to me, every time I'm in an intersection, I'm like, all right, even slower. Or like when it turns green, don't take off again, like slow and controlled. Just very much just, I'm not in a hurry, We'll talk about summer. That's when you can drive like a nut. But in the winter, it's not about that. There will be people who feel more confident in their abilities in driving at the winter, or for better or for worse, and they'll just be zooming around. But like I said, I'd rather end up at my destination safely than in a ditch. So I'm going to be taking my time, especially if I don't feel very confident about the condition of the road that I'm driving on. And that's another thing. It's just like, once it's winter driving, and always assume there's ice. Even if it looks like, oh, it might be clear, it could be black ice and you can't see that it's ice because it looks like the color of the asphalt or something, Just better safe than sorry is how I like to live my life. But with that, if you know that you're, going to be driving a little bit slower and you see somebody coming up, especially on a highway, and there tends to be a space for you to like pull off safely, go do that and let that person zoom around and, have at it. They've got somewhere to be, but, you just be cognizant that your driving may impact people around you. And if you can, pull over. I've even been in a situation where I was the car going a lot faster than somebody in front of me, and they just pulled over on the side of the road. Now, if you safely can do that, great. I'm not not like recommending things like that. But I did notice that, this person was maybe going 30, I was going 55. So they found a spot where they could safely pull off to the side, put on their blinker, signal to me like, hey, I'm going slow. You want to go around me? Go ahead. And when it's, clear on both end or the oncoming traffic, and I got around them and kept on my way. So it works both ways, just be aware of your surroundings. If you're going to go slow and you're not feeling so confident, then, pull over when appropriate to allow people to go around you so you're not causing danger by moving so slowly either, because it's kind of like a double-edged sword. You don't want to cause accident by going too fast, but you also don't want to cause accidents by going too slow. Another thing I'll say about driving in town in the streetlights is this is actually a positive thing. There are certain spots where they'll have signals that'll flash when it's warning you need to slow down because the traffic signal is going to turn red. So it's a advanced warning that really helps you like, oh, I need to slow down. And it is fantastic driving in the winter seeing that, because oh, okay, I should start applying my brakes now to slowly and controlled stop my speed by the time I get to the traffic light. So I like that. Not every signal has that, but there are a lot, especially when you're going at that high speed area or high-speed section of the road to now a stoplight. You'll usually see that type of signal there, which I love that. I haven't seen that outside of Alaska. I'm sure it exists in other cold places like Minnesota, but I hadn't seen that prior to moving here, and I think it's great. The flashing. If you see this flashing, be prepared to stop. It's fantastic. Love that. And adhere to the warning. At least I would, making sure I slow down, no abrupt movements, want to get to things slow and controlled. Kind of similar to that whole not getting anywhere in a rush is just account for that. It's going to take a little bit longer to get to your destination than it would during, let's say, the summertime, right? So if you normally take an hour to get from A to B, it might take an hour 20 because you're just moving a little bit slower. Another thing about that I'll say about that is when driving in the winter, especially up here in the north, we don't have a lot of daylight as compared to the summer where it's like mostly daylight and you can start a trip at 6 p.m. and make it to your destination at 11 p.m. and it's still sunny outside. It's not like that in the wintertime. So when I was moving up here, we planned the trip to drive through all those northern areas only during daylight. Now, not necessarily daylight like, oh, the sun is up, but when we could actually see. So when it's wintertime in the north, we have very, very long blue hours. So I would say you could see, sometimes an hour and a half before the sun is even up. You are still at least able to see. So we planned the whole trip to only get from destination to destination, or to only drive from, one destination to the next during that light hour and minimize our nighttime driving, especially if you're new to it. I definitely recommend that. You don't want two new things like night driving and then also night driving when it's winter. It's just kind of intense. At least it was for me. So we planned that out. So if you're uncomfortable with winter driving or you don't really know how it is or how to feel, maybe limit your driving to during the day when you can. Obviously, when you get up here, if you have to work in the morning, it's going to be dark in the winter. That's just how it is. However, once we have our hard pack and there's streetlights and everything, I've noticed that it's not as dark as it is during the fall right before we get our snow. That's probably the darkest I've seen it in Fairbanks because we don't have the snow everywhere that a reflects back up the light from the streetlights and everything. So it feels more intense driving at night or even during the day, just in the darkness. It's not really nighttime. It's like 7, 8 a.m. I'm going to work and it's pitch black. But that's just because we don't have the snow reflecting the light from the streetlights or the moon or everything. It's a lot easier to see, even though it's slick. So it's like, there's positives and negatives to everything, and having the snow in the hard pack. It's just how it is, I guess, with everything. I'm now a little bit more comfortable, and I just had a trip to Whitehorse, and I left at like 5 a.m. and the sun didn't come up until after 9 over there. And, that was perfectly fine with me because I'm a little bit more comfortable with winter driving. I know what to look out for. I've been doing it for a bit now up here, and I know what stretches are gonna be worse off than others. And there's just like a level of comfort that I have now that I didn't have starting off driving up here. The next thing that I had to get used to driving up here is using my high beams. I hated using my high beams, but now with driving around in the winter and in the darkness, it's just, you see so much more having those high beams on. Now with that, have high beam etiquette. If a car's in front of you, don't have your high beams on. Or if a car is coming in oncoming traffic, turn it off, don't blind the person. But it is something that I found useful as somebody who used to never like using my high beams. Now I do. Things change, I guess, when you live in a place that's dark for part of the year. It's fine. Another thing that people use, which I do not have, but Riley has, is they'll install auxiliary lights on their vehicles as well to even help with seeing. And it's like these like amber lights, or they could really be any sort of color, but it just adds the ability to see. And if you're doing a lot of nighttime driving or darkness driving or whatever, long distances, it's very helpful. Like Riley drives almost every day, 40 miles outside of town. And so having that extra ability to see just helps eliminate one of the issues. Like it's still icy on the road and there's still maybe animals lurking out, but at least you have the ability to see them more than you would with just like regular headlights or high beams. The next thing I'll talk about with winter driving is driving during a winter storm or whiteout driving and all of that. So it's something that if you can avoid doing, I definitely recommend that. However, there are certain situations where I've gotten in whiteout situations, or I was driving through a winter storm and I didn't even know that there was one there. Probably because I didn't check the weather along the entire 9-hour drive that I had, but it just happens. You're driving through mountains. It's likely that there's going to be some sort of storm event forming somewhere, right? Like it's hundreds of miles. It's very likely to happen. So the first time I drove in a winter storm, I did not know the best way to maneuver it. And so I will just tell you what I learned, which is it's okay to slow down, right? Like, I mean, we already know that. I've hit on that before, but it's almost necessary to slow down, especially if there's a vehicle passing you or a truck on the oncoming traffic or somebody going around you, because they'll kick up so much loose snow that it blinds you, right? So the first time it happened, a truck was passing me and I did not slow down or did not like realize that they were going to kick up all of this snow and basically blind me. And I did not slow down, and it's just, there's, a few seconds where I'm like, oh my gosh, I guess just try to stay straight. Hopefully nothing comes up. So what I do now is whenever I can anticipate that that's going to happen, I start to slow down ahead of time and really, minimize my speed. So during the sections where it's, you're blinded by the snow, at least I'm not going, 50 plus miles per hour. I'm more going like 20, 30, and it'll just kind of help the situation a bit. It's not like it lasts less long. It's just you're not going as fast, which is better, right? Like it's always better to not be speeding along when you can't see what's in front of you. But yeah, if you're feeling uncomfortable with driving in it and you have to be caught in a store, obviously find a safe spot to pull over and wait it out. I don't always follow that. I'd rather just get through it, but I do understand that people have different senses of what they feel comfortable driving through, and just listen to that. And, the best thing to do is look up weather reports along your route to see whether or not you're going to be dealing with such a situation. Now, I know this is possible where highways can shut down when they become unsafe. I have not experienced that, but I do know that's a possibility too. So then again, you're going to want to check the DOT 511 website and all that, and make sure there are no road closures or anything like that along your ride. And they're pretty good at staying up to date, but it's just all up to your level of comfort. I guess it's just like with any sort of driving situation. I just know that driving during a snowstorm, I learned real quick that the whiteout condition that you can have either through blown snow or a truck or a car passing by and kicking up the snow is just terrifying, and I hadn't experienced something exactly like it. Now, I have had like heavy rains in Florida that I've driven through where it was pretty blinding, but something about rain versus ice and snow, they both feel bad, I guess, because you could hydroplane. So if you've driven through those really, really bad rainstorms, or maybe even Arizona, like the dust storms, like having low visibility can be pretty alarming. And you always have that option to pull over if it's safe to do so, but also just slow down your speed and, try to maneuver through the situation. The final thing I'll touch on about winter driving is that there is always the possibility of getting stuck or somebody else getting stuck or driven off the road or something like that. And so just be aware of that while you're driving around. If you see, flares or cones or a bunch of cars kind of like piled up off to the side of the highway or the road, they're probably, something's going on here. And to slow down and not really get in the way. And again, learn from my mistakes. I kind of almost barreled through a situation like that because I wasn't aware of the commonality of that, or like, oh yeah, a regular person is going to stop and pull you out if they have the means to do so or the capability to do so, which is great. People are more than willing to help, especially living in such a remote and vast area where it's great that people are willing to help out. But as another driver on the road, just be aware that that could be the situation, and you don't want to make it worse or cause an accident beyond what's already happening. So slow down, wait for them to signal you to go around. If you're able to help out, great, you can do that. But if you don't have the means to, don't make the situation worse and getting yourself stuck too if you don't know how to tow or like pull out a car from a ditch or whatever, like something like that. So just be aware that when you're driving around in the winter, that is a possibility, especially if it's during a snowstorm or after. I mean, shoot, it could be at any time. The roads are pretty slick and people can go off the road. So just be aware, slow down, try not to make the situation worse. If you're able to help, great, that's welcomed. If not, just kind of go along your way and not be another vehicle ending up in a ditch. Next, we'll jump into summer. Woo! Summer driving. So now it's your time to drive like a nut. Not really, but kind of. At least that's how I feel. The roads aren't icy and I'm able to actually go quickly and drive around all crazy. I feel like there's some people who drive like a nut no matter what, but I feel more confident in my abilities to drive in the summertime. Summer also means construction season. What that means is, yes, you could drive like a nut, and yes, you can actually make it to your destination within the allotted time you thought, but actually no, because construction season means that you might be waiting at a construction site for a pilot car to take you through the construction zone. And sometimes you could wait up to like 30 minutes, maybe even longer for that car to lead you through the construction site. Since winter takes up such a large portion of the year, construction doesn't happen year round like it does in Arizona. So now if you live in a cold place, you probably are aware of this. You're like, oh yeah, construction season. Of course, that's what the DOT's doing during the summertime. Well, I didn't know that, right? It's kind of fun when you're like passing by some people on a 2-lane highway thinking you're going to make it to your destination faster, only to be stopped at a construction site. Now, this information where there's construction is going on is definitely posted on the DOT's website. I think they might even show it on the 511 map. I'm not 100% sure. I don't even check it anymore because I just know there's going to be construction at some point during my longer summer drives. And that's just what you've got to expect. And now coming from a place like Arizona where there were, highway construction, it's like I said, going along year round. There's no need to stop during the wintertime. You kind of just go slow through the construction zone. And there are some spots like that, but most what I've seen is that there's a person flagging, they tell you to stop, you wait in a line, and then a pilot car will come and then they'll take you along through the construction site, which can be, 10 plus miles sometimes of construction zone. Usually you're not passing in those situations. You don't want to zoom. They'll have like speed reduced in that area, but the pilot car will lead you through in that, and there'll be signage and everything like that. Now, something I didn't know that happened to me when I was in Canada is I think construction will go from 6:30 a.m. till sometimes 10 o'clock at night, right? Again, it's such a short window that they can get the road work done, that they're trying to use as much time as possible. And so I made it to a destination in the Yukon Territory. It was like after 10 p.m. And so the construction crew had already gone away, or maybe it was at 9:30, but regardless, the construction crew had gone away. And so when I, in the morning, was getting onto the road, I didn't realize that where I was staying was like right in the middle of a construction site. I guess I could have paid attention. Like I saw maybe signs or something that would have signaled it, or like the road was kind of tore up, but I wasn't super aware because I hadn't been stopped before right at that zone. So as I turned onto the main highway, I see these huge like trucks, and clearly they're doing work, and the pilot car saw me and like signaled for me to stop, and they're yelling at me like, "Didn't you know in your construction zone?" And I'm like, I know, like I didn't, I mean, yes, now I see that. So I had to wait and then for the pilot car to come back over and pick me up. Now, in the US, or at least in Alaska, at all of those intersections, they have a sign that says, like, wait for pilot car in your direction to go. But they didn't have that in Canada. So just kind of be aware of your surroundings. Learn from my mistakes. Don't just think you could barrel along. And if you're in a situation like that where you're had turned off in the middle of a construction area portion of the road, just wait for the pilot car moving in your direction to hop in the line if it's during the time that they're actually constructing or doing work, pretty much. Gosh, it was so gnarly. I was just expecting to see a sign like we see in Alaska, but I guess not in the Yukon Territory. It's just a little different. They will also use that if there is a fire impacting the highway. So this past fire season or summer or whatever, there was a fire that was very close to the Parks Highway. I think it even jumped across the Parks Highway. So they closed it down, but they were running a pilot car. And that was taking like hours and hours and hours. And obviously, you know, fire and the fire crew is way more important than like the regular traveler that's just trying to get to whatever vacation spot they're going to or hike or whatever. But again, all this information should be on the 511 website. They usually are pretty good about updating information on there, like when there's road closures or when they are running a pilot car and delays up to, 4 hours or whatever it is. And if you can avoid those areas, it's probably for the best. I think fire information is also on another website. I'll look it up and I'll share that information and hit on it again at the end of this video. The next thing I'll talk about are the dirt roads and dirt highways that are now accessible. Woohoo! So the DOT maintains certain highways and roads from like April-ish or May-ish until like October-ish. And the maintenance will start, like I said, in April and May, and that's great because that means now a regular vehicle can go drive on the Taylor Highway or the Denali Highway or even, I think, McCarthy. There's a handful of roads that are like seasonally maintained by the DOT, and that's nice. That means more places that you can access with your vehicle. But with dirt roads means potholes and angular rocks that can puncture your tires. And thankfully, I have not on my own vehicle had to have a tire change or tire hole fixed temporarily or filled, but it did happen in a vehicle that I was in driving up to the Downton Highway, where really we were on our way back into town, and the person I was with was going a little too fast and definitely got a flat tire. But it was pretty funny because we had been talking about how I don't really know how to change one. I wouldn't know what to do. I would just hope that someone came along and helped me. And like I was like, well, no, you should know what to do. And his wife was like, oh, I think I know what to do. So anyway, as he was preparing to change his tire, 2 truckers came up off the highway and they helped us. We didn't need the help, especially if you ask the guy, we didn't need the help, but it went a lot faster because they had a really nice jack and everything and the tools, and it was pretty nice that they stopped and helped, but that is something that's very common and people expect, especially on most of the dirt roads really. It's like be prepared to fill a hole or have your spare tire, or that kind of goes on to like having some sort of emergency kit or just things that you need whenever driving on for long distances in such remote areas like this. So yeah, dirt roads are open. Be aware of potholes, angular rocks, flat tires, the whole shebang. And I wouldn't speed because I like having my alignment all together, especially going over all the bumps and things. But it's nice that more of Alaska is accessible in the summer months. Another thing that's cool about summer driving is the fact that there is more sunlight, whereas in the winter, I think our shortest day of the year, we have like less than 4 hours of daylight, but you can see for like just about 8 hours. In the summer, it's totally different. I think you can see nearly the entire time, especially the more north you go. And I've left after work, at 6 p.m. or maybe even before that, maybe like 5 p.m. or whatever, and took a 6-hour drive or 7-hour drive either up north to go to on the Dalton Highway or even down to Valdez, and it's like still mostly sunny. You lose a little bit of sun as you go down south, but as you go into the Arctic Circle or up north, that's where you get even more daylight during the summer. And it's just so, so cool to feel comfortable driving super late at night because you're able to see. Now, with all that light, though, there are animals. Now, there are animals and the potential of having animals in the road at all times, but I tend to see them more during the summer. I've seen things like bears, I've seen moose, I've seen coyotes, porcupines, this like long rodent. I don't remember the name, but if I do, this is what it was. When I look it up, caribou, just all sorts of animals out and about roaming on the highways, which is really, really cool. I've seen more animals driving around in Canada, like that whole stretch driving up here, like packs of them or groups of them, but one-offs of animals, I've seen a lot of different types. Oh yeah, we saw lynx too, but that was in March. Whatever. Animals are around. Be aware of that. And you really don't want to hit a moose. You'll probably really mess up your vehicle or possibly die. And it's better to try to be aware and vigilant. However, they do, just run out into the road. They're animals sometimes. And if you can avoid them, that's probably ideal. The next thing I'll talk about are rest stops. So there are seasonal rest stops in Alaska, which is kind of annoying. So if you have to like pee or whatever else in the middle of your winter drive, you're just going off into a turnoff and you'll see lots of little yellow spots where other people had to pee, and you just kind of do your business and get on along their way. In the summer, though, rest stops are open. Some people still prefer, like Riley, peeing outside and doing their business outside. But if you're more of a rest stop person and prefer a pit toilet, well then, good on you. They're more available in the summer than in the winter. In Canada, I just did my trip to Whitehorse last week, like I mentioned, and they were still open more than the Alaska ones. I think almost every rest stop pit toilet that I went to was unlocked and maintained and ready to go, which is nice. Don't know why Alaska is seasonal, but it is what it is. We got to be different. Final thing I'll mention is kind of similar to what I talked about in the winter driving, is like if you are going slow and you're able to get out of the way for someone else to pass around safely, then you should do that, because, going too slow can be indicative of causing an accident. Same with going too fast. And I would say the summer is the same thing as well. The only difference is with the summer, we actually, people of the road adhere to broken yellow lines and dashed yellow lines and all that, where in the winter, you don't necessarily always see that. And so if somebody is able to see that they have the ability to get around you, it doesn't necessarily matter if it's a double line or a dashed broken yellow line. In the summer, though, that is more important, obviously, because if you're passing over the double yellow, that's like going against the traffic rules. So what I do whenever I'm on a 2-lane highway, so that means like one road going each direction, which is a lot of highways in Alaska, is I will hug the right of the lane when it's safe and I'm able to do so. I'll hug the right to allow for the vehicle behind me to see, like, hey, maybe after this next oncoming vehicle, you can go around me and all that. And just be cognizant of that. And obviously, if there's a pull out or like a turn off for the slow vehicles or slow vehicle turn out or pull off or whatever, there's some word for it. Utilize those and allow people to pass you. I think in certain parts of the state, it's required on certain roads. It's like, if you have a delay of 5 vehicles, must use turn out and all that, or pull off. And yeah, I've definitely seen that down in like South Central Alaska. Oh my gosh, it's snowing. Whee! I think that's it about summer driving. Woo, we're carrying right along. This is great. The next is shoulder seasons. Exactly when these seasons are just varies. It depends on, how early we're getting a lot of snow or our hard pack in terms of like when summer becomes fall for a little bit, then becomes winter driving. And then on the other end, like during breakup, when all of that hard pack is getting melted or then cleared off. And so, we'll consider them spring, fall, but really it's just the shoulder seasons. It doesn't really coincide with like when the first day of spring is or when the first day of fall is. It's not like that up here at all. So for the shoulder seasons, the main thing is that the freeze-thaw cycles cause a lot of slick roads. So any sort of like fresh ice, whether it's rain that freezes overnight because it got cold, or there was some snow that then warmed up because of the sun and then froze again, or the roads are starting to melt, but then they freeze again overnight. Like that's like a freeze-thaw. It's the conditions are thawing and then they freeze overnight. And that causes ice, fresh ice, which means slick roads. So it can be pretty difficult to drive on. And another thing about that is, especially in the spring, over the wintertime, gravel is used to help with driving on the hard pack and on the icy roads. And so during the springtime, when the roads are cleared or the ice and the hard pack has melted, that gravel is left, which means it can get kicked up and like crack your windshield. And just cracked windshields are just, you're going to get a chip in your windshield. It's unavoidable. I tried to avoid it and it doesn't work. So just be prepared for that. And I noticed that I think it's always possible to get a cracked windshield, and probably driving on the dirt highways during the summer is another point where that's common or like going to happen. But I do notice that there's more gravel floating around during like the spring before it's cleared off of the roads. And so it really stinks if like a truck or something passes by or an SUV or whatever, and then they kick up a road and there's another chip in my windshield. Gosh, it just like frustrates me so much, but I'm getting used to it. Just know that gravel is now floating around. And then with the freeze-thaw cycles, that roads are going to be icy and slick. And I almost feel like it's a little bit worse than full-on winter driving in some ways. The next thing I'll talk about the shoulder seasons, and this is kind of, again, more like spring than fall, but it actually is kind of fall too, is that on those dirt roads, not necessarily the dirt highways, but it could be, but like more like the dirt side roads, is that they are going to be like muddy and gross and sometimes difficult to drive on, especially in the spring when all of that snow like melts, but the ground hasn't firmed up yet, and it could be almost impassable, which stinks because especially in the spring when you're ready to go outside and do outdoor activities and the highways look fine, but then a dirt road that takes you to the trail or whatever is all like messed up, and you don't want to get stuck in the silty mud, and that kind of stinks. And along with that is your car is just going to be gross and dirty during this time until the roads are cleared up or firmed up with the snow. So the silty mud, or like just like the dirt, and it's mainly the silt. It just gets on everything, and it's so gross. And if you have a garage, I recommend not allowing that silt mud to like collect in your garage. I guess you could. It's just kind of gross. I remember I drove on the Elliott Highway in early April, and at some parts it was actually starting to thaw up. So I was like driving through mud patches and it got caked all over my vehicle. And I didn't think like, oh, this is going to sit on my car and it's almost like frozen to it. But when I go in my garage, it's going to warm it up. It's going to like fall to the ground. And it did exactly that. And it did dry up. But so what? Now I have all this like silty material just in the garage, and I left it there until Riley visited and he swept it up because I'm a girl and that's just what girls do. I was like, I don't care, whatever. He was like, this is terrible, and cleaned up my situation. Anyway, we appreciate the males when they do, things like that. So yes, your vehicle is just going to be gross. The last thing I will talk about the shoulder seasons, but again, this is more about spring, is the roads are covered in trash. It is disgusting. It's just the snow covers it all during the wintertime. So when it all thaws or melts, it just reveals trash all over the highways and the streets. And it is pretty disgusting and probably the ugliest time of the year. Honestly, breakup in general is just, I think Alaska is the grossest during that time. I mean, it's exciting when like green up starts and you're like, oh, summer's almost here. But then you look around and there's trash everywhere and you're like, oh, this is gross. But what's cool is there is a cleanup day. And I'm pretty sure it's the same in Anchorage or like all over Alaska. But there are these volunteer groups that just go out and they'll clean up the trash and they'll leave these yellow bags to be picked up and taken away. And so by mid-May, a lot of the trash is picked up and it's then beautiful and nice to look at again. But man, it's just jarring the first time you see the trash all over the streets. And it's just something I did not expect or know happened here, and something you wouldn't know until you live here, which is just super crazy. All the trash. We're gross. Who throws trash outside? I don't know, but clearly someone does because it's just left all over the streets and it's not great. So some final tips I'll leave you with are just general things that I find helpful no matter what season you're driving in. The first is check information regarding to your drive. Now, what I mean by that is check the state 511 website to know what the road conditions are. If you're curious on weather, check National Weather Service for different areas, especially if you're doing a longer drive, right? Like a multiple hour drive or hundreds of miles. Check different points along the way. Like, what does the weather look like? Are there any storms expected? What are the conditions? Another thing that I find helpful are checking the cameras. So FAA has cameras set up. There's an FAA website. And then there's also on the 511, they have cameras too. So I've done that too, where I'm just like, is it going to be sunny and beautiful? Or am I going to be driving in clouds? Or like, what does the road physically look like? Because they'll have cameras pointed at the road too, which is just like super helpful. During fire season, check that fire website. I will put links to all of these things, maybe in the description or something like that, just because I didn't use these right off the bat. I would just like go into my drives blind, especially my first year living here. And now knowing all of the available resources I have, I like to use them. It just helps knowing what you're getting yourself into. So definitely check your resources. The next tip is having it's almost like an emergency vehicle kit, right? Just having stuff in your vehicle that's appropriate for the season that you're driving in. So if it's the winter time, having chains or, maybe like a shovel or something to brush off your hood or flares or things like that, extra clothes. And, I even have better winter boots than what I'm wearing now and just things to be prepared. Maybe that could be a whole separate video. It's like, what do I have in my kit? But in the summer, it's definitely having extra windshield wiper fluid, having the what is that called? The patch repair for the tire, having your spare tire, having an air compressor, like all of these things are definitely useful. And it does vary depending on what season, like what I carry with me on my trips. The next tip is basically fill up on gas whenever you can. I have a pretty big tank and I can drive in the summer, definitely almost like 600 miles on a full tank of gas. In the winter, it's less so. It's probably closer to like 450-ish, depending on, depending on how like slow I'm going and everything, or like how much stop and go I have. But definitely I recommend filling up on gas whenever you can, especially living up in the north. You just never know the situation you're going to get yourself into, or you're going to have to run your car more or for longer periods of time without actually driving. Or you're going to get stuck somewhere and need the gas on or whatever to keep warm. Who knows, right? So I like to keep it above half a tank. Now I'm getting a little bit more ballsy in my driving and I'll let it go down to a quarter tank. But especially in the beginning and not really knowing what could be the situation, I just try to keep it above half a tank and fill up whenever you can. I know now on certain parts of my drive, like where I like to fill up and like where the prices are a little bit more friendly, and just always trying to keep it at half a tank or higher. It's good habit to have. Some people even carry extra tanks of gas or cans of gas with them on their drives. I don't necessarily need to do that. Again, pretty good tank size gas tank, but definitely keep the tank filled. It's just a good habit, I would say. And the final thing is that defensive driving goes a long way. It's similar to like what I said in driving winter, like going slow and controlled and, not trying to be aggressive. If you see someone wants to zoom around you, okay, like when it's safe for me to get around, I'm going to get around. I'll let you pass, like I'd rather arrive alive. I have no need to drive as a nut. I'm just going to try to be vigilant and pay attention to my surroundings, look for crazy people, crazy cars, crazy animals, and, just really want to be aware of what's going on. It's really awesome driving up here. I think because you could end up on a highway and not really see that many vehicles. And I love that, right? You really feel out there. But then with that, it's like you're really out there and you could end up in some situations where no one's not around for a while to help you. In certain major highways, that's not necessarily true. Like someone's going to be around and most likely help you out if you really need the help, or someone's going to be around to help you out when you really need the help. But it's just good to be prepared and have all of the necessary things that you could need just in case something happens to you, or like a storm happens or whatever, right? Like you just want to be prepared. Anyway, yeah, that's kind of what I've learned. And things that I'm just going to share with you in case you're like me and had never lived in such a cold place and thought about all these things and the different situations that you can get into driving in such a remote and cold place. Cold sometimes, but remote place. Pretty cool. Anyway, I really appreciate all of the cool feedback and comments I got on my video about what I learned living in Fairbanks after 4 and 8 months. And I really, really appreciate all that, and that's great. And if you have any other ideas of things you'd like me to talk about living in Fairbanks, again, I've been here, 21 months, or just about, right? So almost 2 years. I almost feel like, when when parents are like, my kid's 20 months old or whatever, almost 2 years. I've been here for almost 2 years. And that's not forever, but still enough to share my knowledge with you. And let me know what type of video you'd like next. I really like sharing whatever knowledge I have, although I haven't lived here forever. Have been here for just under 2 years, and I get out a lot, which is nice. So I offer that kind of perspective, as somebody who's not just sitting around inside or staying in town, who really goes out and tries different things and gets into some precarious situations. I mean, gosh, I could talk about the winter cabin adventures and hiking and certain situations that maybe we shouldn't have been, but it's all right. It worked out in the end. And I don't know, I just like helping you get prepared for your time up here because it's great. I mean, it is what you make out of it. Some people are a little bit more negative about the reality of it with like the fires and mosquitoes and things like that, which it is. There are some drawbacks, but it's just a beautiful place. And if you choose to focus on that, then you're only going to notice that. But there's a lot of beauty and wonderfulness that happens up here. I mean, look, I was filming this video for probably like 35, 40 minutes and no other person came here, and it is a public park. So that just kind of shows you how it is, right? Like you can really get out and be alone, which is fun, right? Like I like that, alone with the nature. Anyway, I'm rambling now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this helps you a little bit and you can learn from my mistakes. I want to make a specific video about driving on like dirt roads or like the Dalton Highway specifically, because I learned a whole lot on my drive up there. And so that'll probably come at some point. But anyway, yeah, anything else that you could find interesting or you'd like me to talk about, just let me know and I'll put something together. Okay, enjoy. I need to warm up now. It's a little chilly.